Hi, welcome. It's episode 155 of Grow Yourself Up. Delighted to be back with you. This is our first episode of 2026. Can you believe it? This is we started in 22, so 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. This is the fifth year. Grow Yourself Up will turn 4 in June. Okay, I'm delighted to be back with you. And today we're going to talk about attachment theory and building a secure relationship with ourselves, earned secure attachment, and why this is so important. So when we've experienced childhood trauma, developmental trauma, chronic stress in our family, a really kind of heightened and stressful environment because of trapped survival stress in our parents' nervous system, however this is manifested in your own growing up context, we are insecurely attached because we haven't had a felt sense of safety and security from our caregivers, our parents. One of the crucial things of attachment theory is this kind of internal part of it, which is the assessment by the child of how available are the parents, how emotionally available and kind of present are they for the children. And that's an internal assessment by the child. So I'm going to talk more about attachment theory, but I'm trying to draw out this thing about why many of us are insecurely attached. And this is nothing to feel shame about. It's nothing to think, that it's a disaster, because this is eminently possible to change. But when we haven't had a consistent enough, good enough upbringing, we have shame, we have fear, we have a kind of a low-level panic that will there be people there for us, because we haven't had that felt sense of, yes, there's always people here for me. This is good. We have much more had a sense of, I'm going to have to be there for them, and there's actually no one there for me. So shifting this in adult life is really essential, because we want all of your parts to know that you are now really there for yourself, because sadly, we can't go back to redo our childhoods. We can't kind of have a redo or a do-over with our parents. Honestly, I sometimes really love that, though. That would just I sometimes dream about that. Or I even dream about my parents being still alive. So that somehow there would be opportunities for repair. I don't even know where that came from, because I wasn't planning to say that. But anyway, So what's really crucial then is to give all of your child parts, all like younger baby parts of you and all parts of you, a felt sense of you really being there for you. But this is the absolute opposite of how many of us have learned to survive, because when you've been parentified, when you've had narcissistic parents, when you have a dysfunctional family, the role reversal that happens is that you are set up to care for your parents. And this is such a common generational pattern. And so at the heart of that is self-neglect and self-abandonment, because if you're constantly scanning your environment, you're hyper-vigilant for how do I give my parents what they need so that they can give me some of what I need. When you're hyper-vigilant like that, I talked about this in some early episodes, your radar is constantly facing outwards all of the time, scanning for what do I need to do to take care of people. And now I'm saying to you, what we're going to do now is we're switching our radar back to ourselves. We want to know, what do I need to do to take care of all these precious parts of me? And that's the absolute core of reparenting. It's that turning to self, not because self is the only important kind of unit in the world, because unfortunately in our culture we're very self-focused, but we need to nourish ourselves so that we can be part of our collective and nourishing to other people. So there's a concept from 12 Step where they talk about being fully self-supporting. They actually talk about that in the context of meeting, but I think it's a lovely thing to adopt in this case, which is that we want to become fully self-supporting. So each of you, to become fully self-supporting of yourself, you will make mistakes. You will sometimes be an asshole. You will sometimes be difficult. You will sometimes be grumpy or horrible or unreasonable or whatever. We are all like that at different points. But that doesn't mean you are not supporting of yourself. You would acknowledge, oh, I've been an asshole, or oh, I was really difficult that day, or oh, I owe that person an apology. But you don't reject and abandon yourself based on that. You are still fully self-supporting. So that is what we're trying to cultivate here, because the reparenting then comes in that presence, that felt sense of safety of you knowing that you are always there for yourself. And this can take many years to cultivate. It's not, I don't think this is an easy process. So, we get glimmers of being really self-supporting, but then many of us still flip into abandoning behavior. So any overworking is abandoning, any overbooking or kind of constantly scheduling is abandoning yourself. If you are addicted to something, that's also a pattern of abandoning yourself. So this is a kind of a shift that we have to do. So I want to talk about this because it's really such an important part of kind of our own recovery. And being fully self-supporting leads to having earned secure attachment. So let me just talk a little bit about high level. I'm going to talk more about attachment styles and more about some attachment theory. But for now, I want to give a bit of a high level kind of overview of it. So we've talked a bit about John Bowlby before. John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth. So John Bowlby is often credited as being the father of attachment theory, but most people, other writers, researchers, have written that they consider Bowlby to be the father and Mary Ainsworth to be the mother. So kind of those were the parents who kind of created attachment theory. Mary Ainsworth herself has written that John Bowlby did more of the theory, that she really, in her own work, did a lot of research which really backed up attachment theory. So she did a lot of research first in Uganda, and then so observing a lot of mother-baby dyads within their home context. And then she saw the same patterns in Baltimore in the US once she had left Uganda. Again, observing mother-baby dyads and the context of the family in their homes over a period of time. And she contributed many important things. She also then went on to develop something called the strange situation, which I will talk about in a separate episode. But so Mary Ainsworth and Bowlby are kind of credited with this. There is some criticism of attachment theory, that it's very Western-based. There's various other things about that. If you grow up in a more collective culture, you maybe won't have the same focus on few attachment figures. I'm not going to go into that right now. So attachment is a neurobiological system. It's wired into us. It's part of our genetic programming, essentially, because it's there to ensure our species survives. We are really, really relationship driven because human babies cannot survive. Many mammals born out in, say, the wild, are born and they drop out of their mother and they can already walk and they could already source themselves food. A human baby, there's no way that would happen. We have to be nurtured for a long, long period of time. We're a very kind of resource intense species in terms of the amount of resources that need to be spent, both from a time, energy, everything point of view, to raise the young. Whereas if you're like, I don't know, an impala out in the wild, you might just pop your baby out. Maybe she stays with you for a while, but she can eat grass already by herself and she can already stand. But human babies are obviously not like that. And so attachment often is now, secure attachment is seen as being really, really important from an emotional security point of view. But attachment is much more than just emotional security. It ensures our survival. And so we really kind of have to hold that in mind, that it's this neurobiological thing that's part of our genetic program. We have this kind of in us to help us with how we respond to threat and insecurity. And we engage in various different behaviors because of our attachment system to ensure our survival. And we're going to talk about some of those behaviors, kind of the 3 key areas. And then I'm going to link that to how we need to be with ourselves as we try and create an secure attachment. So I hope this is all making sense. So just to recap, it's Bowlby and Ainsworth are the mother and the father. We'll talk separately about the strange situation. It's a neurobiological system to ensure our survival. And it's not just about emotional security. So according to Bowlby, we'll kind of, if we kind of draw out what our attachment system has, it's got 3 different key responses to how we respond to threat. So anytime we're under threat, anytime we feel insecure, anytime we feel stressed, we will seek out our attachment figures. So we have what's called proximity, maintaining proximity type of behavior. So we seek out our caregiver, we monitor where they are. And this happens even from tiny babies. You notice tiny babies scanning. If they want their caregiver, their mum, their dad to come closer, they engage in crying, calling out, clinging. If your child is like older and can crawl, they might crawl to you, they might run to you. So there's this proximity seeking behavior because to the attachment figures, and it's normally in a hierarchy of like the mum or the dad, whoever's the primary caregiver. It's typically the proximity seeking behavior typically goes to the mother, and then maybe if you've got there's a dad, and if you've got maybe involved grandparents, they might also be, or if you've got a nanny, or some other kind of close childcare provision, that would also be part of this attachment hierarchy, and this kind of proximity seeking behavior is to ensure that they can get protection from the attachment figure. And we do that even as adults. So, when my husband travels, I get more stressed because I'm like, I don't have so much proximity to my adult attachment figure. And so I might phone him or I want to check in that he's okay, or I want to know when he's got to where he's landing or things like that. So we, as adults, we still engage in this proximity seeking behavior. You might notice yourself, if something stressful happens and you're actually in your house with your partner, you might go to that room wherever they are to seek them out and to get some reassurance or to have a hug. So there's that proximity seeking behavior. Then there's a key concept which actually came from Mary Ainsworth, where she noticed how babies use their mother as a secure base. And you'll notice this in playgrounds where little children and toddlers and even babies, if babies are able to walk or kind of crawl or something, they will go like a little way away from their caregiver, and then they look back. And then they see that they're being encouraged, or maybe there's a big smile on the mum's face, and then the baby's like, okay, I'm okay, I feel safe, I can travel a bit further away. Or they just want to check they're being, they're being watched and they are being held in mind, basically. So this is what Bowlby called, this is an exploratory behavioral system, and it's connected to the attachment system. And when our attachment figures are there to provide us safety, we feel much more likely to explore. So if we know that there's safety there, it's almost like you could put the attachment figure down in a circle and draw in the center of a circle, and take a long string and draw all the way around the attachment figure, and the child would feel free to explore that huge area. And it's good that children can explore, because that indicates they feel safe enough to take some distance, and then they can turn around and check, or they can come back. And Margaret Mahler, who did a lot of research in the space and observations, she observed infants and toddlers, and she called it that the babies and toddlers would briefly venture away from their mothers, and then they would come back. And she called that refueling, which is just really beautiful if you think about that they go away for a little bit and then they need to come back, maybe for a hug, maybe for a little drink or something, or a deep look into their mother's eyes, so that they're like, okay, she's here, it's okay. I can go a bit further, or I can go back to where I was. She's not going anywhere. And that concept of refueling, we actually do our whole lives where we are like, is my person still there? Is it safe for me to go away a bit? What will happen? And we have to, as our children grow old, actually, we have to let them determine when they come back to us as they increasingly individuate, separate, and differentiate. And that can be difficult, particularly when people get into the teenage years, but we won't go into that now. But just really hold in mind that concept of the secure base, that kind of joyful exploration, that refueling, and that reassurance that comes for the baby and toddler and the young child and the older child indeed. I mean, this is like something where if you go to a birthday party and your child doesn't know many people, they feel really shy or something or stressed, they might sit on your lap for most of the party. And then in the last 10 minutes, they might feel safe enough to just go a few meters away. And if that feels good, they might go a few more meters away. And that's all about using you as a secure base. And you can really see this when children get put into childcare settings and the kind of phasing in period or the transition period is not gentle enough or well suited enough to them. They can really struggle because suddenly their secure base is gone and the secure base is not there when they come back to check. I talked a bit about this with Kimberly with Kimberly Olaf Cooper in, I can't remember exactly which episode, I think it was 151, about how we can make school settings and educational settings more supportive for children from an attachment point of view, because having the secure base removed is a huge, huge threat to our systems in an environment, say school, where we are already feeling threatened because it's like completely different and new. So there's that. Number one is the seeking and attempting to maintain proximity, that seeking behavior. Then we've got using the attachment figure as a secure base, and that's coming from Mary Ainsworth, her work. And then the last one is when we are having a sense of distress, or we kind of we hurt ourselves or something happens, we flee to our attachment figure and they're our safe haven. So it's like our kind of, they're our anchor in a storm. They're our like lighthouse. We might, if we have been exploring and they're our safe base, we rush back to them as our safe haven. And we seek, and this is such a beautiful thing that links us to the animals, we seek safety in a person, not in a place. We don't, we ask, like, say, our home is our safe place, but if something happens to me, I phone my husband, or I text my husband if I need some sort of support. If I happen to be having therapy, I'll tell them first. But our safe haven is the person that we contact when when something happens, or we have something stressful, or we're feeling threatened or something. And that behavior continues throughout our lifespan. So attachment is a requirement for life. It's not, we don't grow out of our attachment. We still have this relationship seeking as a way of maintaining safety and connection for ourselves throughout our lifespan. So please don't ever feel shame about this. And this is also particularly complex with complex trauma, because when we haven't, and generally with trauma, when we haven't had safe relationships, it's bizarre to us to think, relationships are a place of safety, when we have literally no evidence for that. And that's often why pets, so cats and dogs, because they also are mammals, and they have a limbic structure similar to us, or much more simple, but similar to us, why they are such amazing attachment figures for many children, because they might be the first kind of experience of having a really safe relationship. But so the safe haven concept is just really important. And I'm going to read you something really beautiful that Bowlby wrote in 1980. He says, intimate attachments to other human beings are the hub around which a person's life revolves, not only when he is an infant or a toddler, but throughout his adolescence and his years of maturity as well, and on into old age. Unfortunately, he kept on using he, and not she. I didn't change that. That was his words. But so you can really hear that this is, it's a biological imperative. We need human relationships. And we know from the research on loneliness that loneliness is more dangerous than many other health conditions, actually. So you can really, we need to be embedded in a web of support. We need it to be embedded in a web of lovely relationships. And that's really important, that we build a lovely relationship with ourselves. So if we just think about those three things, so there's the seeking and attempting to maintain proximity thing. There's operating as a secure base and the safe haven. And there's also that felt sense of that internal aspect of, do I have a felt sense of this person being available for me? And all of these combine to create what John Bowlby called the internal working model. And other theorists have come up with, some people call it the architecture of the mind, or maybe not the architecture, or they call it like basically the way your mind is built, your kind of your some people might call it a mind map, but it's basically your working model of how people are going to respond to you. If you have been securely attached and you've always, when you've been proximity seeking and when you've been crying out and calling, they have responded enough of the time. They have been there enough of the time as your secure base, so you trust they will be there. And they have been there as your safe haven enough of the time that you trust they will be there. Then you will have an internal working model which says, the world is good. People are there for me. People are generally benevolent. People want the best for me. People are not going to abandon me. People expect the best for me, and they tend to me. So you have a kind of a felt sense of security of, people are there enough of the time for me. And you take that view into the world where you think the world is basically benevolent, and you don't have a lot of anxiety that you're just going to be left. Crucially, when you have been tended to enough, you also are much more free of shame, because shame is a relational experience which starts in about the second year of life, where you are not tended to sufficiently, and what the child and the baby kind of makes up as this, I am too much, this is too much, there's something I need to change because this person is not responding to me, which is why chronic shame is always a part of trauma and complex trauma, where childhood trauma, because you have this sense of I'm wrong, I'm bad, I'm not enough, because we basically haven't been responded to enough. And that manifests on a nervous system level, that we have a pattern of kind of collapse, or almost a sense of dissolving, because we haven't been held, maybe both physically, but kind of held in mind and tended to enough. So we think there's something wrong with us, essentially. That's that kind of that sense of shame being led into the entirety of us, like in all our cells. And when we have secure attachment, we don't have that, because we just think the world is good, people respond to me, and we have confidence that is the ways things will be. Whereas when we are insecurely attached, we base that felt sense on how available our parents have been previously. And we have this feeling of like, oh, they're not quite there for me. And we have that sense of shame laid throughout of us, of I'm wrong, I'm bad. And we don't, in insecure attachment, we don't have that sense of the world is always good. We have that sense of what's going to happen. I need to look after myself. And we have a lot more fear. And we don't necessarily expect the best of people, because we have not seen the best of people. And that's very broad, brushstroke kind of ideas. And I'm going to go into much more detail about the different attachment styles. The key thing to really remember is that this can change radically within the context of healthy, safe relationships in adulthood. You can build that for yourself. I wouldn't say alone. In my experience, that has required therapy, and then developing loving relationships with other people apart from my therapist. And crucially as well, if you're listening and you feel concerned, because this is always very sensitive and difficult, because many of us are parenting now, having come from an insecure, being insecurely attached, maybe disorganized, maybe avoidant or ambivalent. And I have elements of both all three: disorganized, ambivalent, and avoidant. And I will go into those in more detail, not in this episode. And so then we can get really kind of quite paranoid, actually, about how do we create a secure attachment with our child. Making sense of our own childhood and understanding our story is a vital part of that. But I really want to reassure you that each thing you change as your children grow up, even if they are older now, grown up, will improve all the work that we do on ourselves, shifts our own nervous system, shifts our sense of presence. It shifts what we send out into the atmosphere. And that shifts things. As you become more regulated, you get more regulation on board, you are less reactive. You will tolerate more. You will be able to be present for your children in a way that you didn't. So it's never too late to start doing this work. I really want to kind of say that. So coming back to that idea of being fully self-supporting, we really want to be all of those things for ourselves. We really want to be maintaining proximity to all our parts. So not rejecting ourselves, not saying, oh, you're so shit. Oh, why can't you do that? Why? Like criticizing ourselves constantly. We want to be lovingly giving ourselves messages. So I would say self-compassion is a key part of both proximity, maintaining behavior, and acting as a secure base for ourselves. Because if you think about it, if you're insecurely attached and you want to put yourself forward for something at work which feels really scary, you need to be really self-encouraging to yourself and really loving and taking delight in the idea that you're going to do this, in the same way that a mother might encourage her baby to go and, I don't know, climb on some little like tiny jungle gym or walk a little step into the sandpit or something. And you've seen that in parks or wherever you see babies and mothers, where they're like, oh, no, I know you can do this. I know you can. You can just take one more step. I'm right here. And we have to develop that type of capacity with ourselves. Of course, we also need that from other people. But when the rubber hits the road, I've talked about this before, that we only have therapy or whatever we're having, a couple of hours a week. And we've got those other 160 hours where we are with ourselves. And we have to cultivate that deeply loving attachment relationship with ourselves and all our parts so that we can change the way we turn up in the world. We can change what is sent back to us from the world. Because if we constantly go out into the world and think everyone is shit, you're going to be unkind to me, I'm never going to be able to do any presentation at work or something because I'm crap, that's going to be what our truth, that's what we're going to create. And so that attachment piece of like being really loving and supportive of ourselves is really crucial in shifting how we operate in the world. In my view, we absolutely need therapy to help with that, or a cohort of very loving, supportive people around us. So that might be your partner, your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend. Maybe you've got very loving siblings. Maybe you've got a very loving friendship group and you're very supportive. It might even be something like a book club or a coaching club where you each coach each other if you've got a group of friends and you do coaching together. I think this is really, really important because in the reparenting of ourselves, we need to form these functions for ourselves. So I really want you to think about this felt sense of availability. How available are you to yourself? When you have if someone says to you, do you want to come to this party? And you immediately think, oh, my word, no way. So I want to go to that party. It's freezing cold and I can't be bothered or whatever. Do you immediately crush that voice and think, you've got to go to this party? Or do you lovingly listen to yourself? And you might still go to the party. You might think, I really love that friend and I really want to show support. So it doesn't matter that I'm cold, but I'm going to go. But the way you respond to yourself is really, really important in terms of that felt sense of security of yourself and lovingly tending to all your own parts and knowing that you are worthy and lovable in all the ways that you are. So we need, if we think about what this false sense of security, internal security is, it's about listening to our own body and the cues we get from our body. And it's about a lot about boundaries and allowing ourselves to be as we are without constantly needing approval from others. Because when we have not been securely attached and we haven't had our needs tended to, we're constantly scanning outwards, out like in the outside world, for am I okay? Do you approve of me? And actually, we want to pull that back into ourselves and know that we approve of ourselves. That's a long journey to kind of really being settled and feeling safe enough in your own self-approval. When we, let me give you an example. We have a somatic experience of our current nervous system patterns. So, for example, if my children get sick, my somatic, or when they're coughing at night, the somatic experience for me of that is immediately I get tightening in my chest. So kind of a bracing and a contraction, like a crunching. I get contraction in my tummy as well. And then immediately that those kind of bodily signals send stuff, communicating via the vagus nerve all the time. And so I get signals sent up to my brain with this bracing and this kind of sense of anxiety in my body. And then I start to crunch really anxious thoughts about what's going to happen to them, all of that. So from a securely attachment point of view and from holding this somatic experience, I want to shift this in the moment. I need to experience that and give myself a sense of safety at the moment. So that might be bringing in a missing resource. That might be just tolerating the sensation. So it might be sharing it with my husband, saying how scared or anxious I feel about when they get sick, talking to my body. So putting a hand on my heart or my chest where it's feeling anxious, then on my tummy, reassuring myself, acknowledging why I might feel this about when they cough, acknowledging all the different layers and being with that somatic experience. And when I'm saying a somatic experience, I'm saying the somatic experience I am having in the moment in response to the trigger of them coughing and their sickness. And my relationship with myself is crucial in that, because if I go, oh, don't be so ridiculous, and, try and really push through and I don't tend to sensations in my body, that will just stimulate more anxiety for me. And I don't have a chance of kind of changing that pattern. So if we think about that Viktor, that Viktor Frankl quote that you probably know, let me just try and find it. It's sometimes people say it's Rollo May, but anyway, this is a famous quote that's often attributed to Viktor Frankl. Some people say Rollo May, some people say B.F. Skinner. Anyway, broadly, the quote is, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Now, when we have trauma, the stimulus and the response are fused. So they just stuck together, basically. And we are trying to prise that open. If you watch it on YouTube, you'll see all my hand gestures, and create a space there and have a different response. So when we are trying to cultivate earned, secure attachment for ourselves, based on hopefully modeling by our therapist, we want to be loving to ourselves when we have a trigger. So loving about, oh, wow, it's so hard when they're sick. Let me talk to someone who's got a different perspective and who's not as anxious as me. So one of my friends or a husband or something, so that I can tolerate that somatic experience with a sense of safety and give myself a disconfirming experience. So give myself an experience which is different to the experiences I've had before. And being really fully self-supporting of myself is tolerating and loving myself through these reactions, which might seem kind of nonsensical, if that makes sense. We also need boundaries when we're tolerating, when we're kind of trying to create this secure attachment thing with ourselves. And we need boundaries for many different reasons, but we need boundaries that allow us to ask for what we need because of what's going on for us. Boundaries are not fixed. Boundaries are flexible. They change over time. And we may put down, in the beginning when we start putting down boundaries, we might be very clunky with our boundaries and very, sometimes people get quite confused about boundaries and what boundaries, they think boundaries are about controlling other people's behavior. It's not. It's more about stating what we will tolerate and not tolerate, and that if some things happen, we might have to kind of remove ourselves because it's about our actions, about what we can tolerate. It's not about trying to control others, or we can't force someone else to do something. And we have to experiment with boundaries as well. So you sort of have to practice with what feels right for you and what makes all the different parts of you feel safe. Now, boundaries are also very personal. So you might have a boundary around something which no one else agrees with. And that doesn't mean your boundary is not valid. It means that for you, there's something specific that gets triggered in a certain scenario. And you're allowed to tend to yourself and ask for a boundary or say that you won't be able to manage if that's what's going to happen again. Let me give you an example. So many, many years ago, I lived with a flatmate in central London, in Southwark, so just south of the river. And I was still working in financial services then. And I had an electric toothbrush, and she had an electric toothbrush head, but not actually the bottom of the electric toothbrush, so not of the charger thing. And so she would always use my toothbrush, the base of my toothbrush, to brush her teeth. She was obviously using her own toothbrush head. And after a while, that really started to irritate me because then it wouldn't be charged when I wanted to brush my teeth because she'd been using it. And so I asked her to stop using that. And it irritated me. It was triggering for me because I have been in a position my whole life of caring for other people. That was kind of my role in my family. And so this again felt like I was in a role of caring for someone by providing this thing, and I was the one who needed to be making sure the toothbrush was charged. And at the time I thought, oh, I'm very ungenerous and this is really pathetic of me. How can I ask this? And I did eventually say, please don't use it. And still now when I look back, I'm like, oh gosh, that feels really ridiculous. And I sort of think maybe if I had more regulation on board, I would have just put my charger in the common area and, we could have just all charged the toothbrush together, whatever. Maybe it would bother me less, but at the time it really bothered me. And I might look back now and think, oh, I was really pedantic. And I am a pedantic person, actually. I'm quite pedantic in some ways. So, but my job is to understand why I'm like that and to love myself through that. I might be irritating to other people, and I may in time, when I'm more regulated, be less irritating or be more chilled out. I am not that chilled out. And there's many reasons for that. But my job is not to, because, back those many years ago, I was like full into criticizing myself and thinking I needed to tend to her. And, but that's not my job. My job is to tend to myself and to really love myself into a place of being able to look after all my own parts. There is again, coming back to if I have more regulation on board, I might behave differently now. I might have more generosity of spirit now, or I might be able to share or something. But at that time, I couldn't. So the boundaries for me then, and that was a time when I was really working on having own secure attachment with myself, was to tend to myself with my own needs at that point in time. And I believe that in a kind of a healing journey, we go into a place initially of being very insular and very self-focused. And then when we have enough security on board, when we have enough regulation on board, when we feel safe enough, we can then open up to more compromise, to more generosity, to we tend to get more relaxed. But that was not where I was in my journey. And so we are all on a different stage, and we criticizing ourselves does not help in terms of our own journey. So sometimes I look back on some of the boundaries I've set, not even specifically that one. And this wonderful housemate now lives in Australia, and she might even listen to this. So, yeah, but I think that we might look back on the ways that we've behaved and think, oh, I could have been a bit like, I don't know, more reasonable or whatever. But again, that thing about being fully self-supporting and really being there for ourselves in our idiosyncrasies. And I'm not suggesting be an arsehole, but really, really like tend to your parts, notice your fears, don't abandon yourself. And this is really, really, really important in motherhood because there's so much emotional complexity in motherhood and parenting. And so we won't get to a place of being more regulated, of being more able to look at the nuance, of being able to look at all the complexity, of being able to hold many truths at the same time. We won't get to that place by criticizing ourselves. We will only get to that place by creating more emotional safety for ourselves and then being able to look at the wide variety of options that we have and on what we want to pull forth on like we're much more able to decide, how do I want to be today? What is important? How can I live in line with my values when we are cultivating emotional safety for ourselves and when we firmly have our own back? And this is really, it can feel so difficult because you've been taught your whole life that you have to tend to others. And so this can feel actively like a real subversive act. But I really want to kind of kick off this with 2026 of like, how can you improve your relationship with yourself? How can you start to be fully self-supporting? How can you be really loving? How can you focus on trying to be close by, like have close proximity to all those parts of you who you've previously tried to split off and disavow? Your rage. How can you be there for your rage? How can you notice what that's trying to tell you? Your sadness, your sorrow, all of that, your grief. How can you really be a secure base for yourself and a safe haven? Because we want to be a safe harbor for ourselves in times of storm, essentially. And this is not in any way suggesting we do this by ourselves, but it's saying, and we need to be a safe haven for ourselves. I hope you have a fantastic therapist who can be like that for you as well. And you have to develop that capability for yourself. Go back and listen to the episode on rage and your inner baby. That was 153, I believe, about making space for your inner baby. That's also really an important part of this. And we're going to be doing more on attachment styles. If you've got any questions about this or, I don't know, scenarios you want me to answer or cover, email me at, you can either put a thing on my website, there's a space for forms, or you can send me an email at cath@cathcunahan.com. So it's delightful to be back with you. And together, we're changing the world. I'm sending you lots and lots of love. Bye.